Today we're going to be talking about Thancred, and for people that already have him, I think that you're going to be able to get some good use out of him this week when he returns with the Final Fantasy XIV collaboration. However, if you are a new player and you don't have him yet, you'll get him for free in your inbox, but I do have to warn people not to spend Visiore on his shards. Yes, he's limited. Yes, he's a super cool character, but there are ways to get his shards for free, and I think that if you really want to have him at max level, then your best bet is to slow build them. So let's talk about why I feel this way and break down some of his upgrades. If you're new to War of the Visions, or maybe you just weren't playing during the last Final Fantasy XIV collaborations, then you may not be familiar with Thancred. So I'll tell you a little bit about his gameplay style. He is a bruiser with tank levels of HP and defense, plus some pretty nice resistances aside from magic. However, he has no hate generation on his kit, and he cannot serve as your main tank without being externally given hate in some way. So when Thancred arrives, he's going to have the highest attack in the game. However, he doesn't have any attack buffs from his passives. He will be a damage dealer. Thancred can also break both defense and spirit and has chaining, so it makes him a very, very viable PvE option. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different in this video. I'm going to show you the pros and cons right from the get-go, and then I'll talk a little bit about each of them and why I think this way. So we're going to start with the pro of Thancred having tank levels of HP, great defense, and very nice resistances, because this is a big deal, and it's something that people underrated. When Englebert came out, they looked at his magic resistance, they looked at his lack of spirit, and they thought, okay, Englebert is going to be totally toast. If Helena wants to roast him, it's going to be really easy. And it's true, you can do a lot of damage to an Englebert. However, with the low agility, the low mobility, the fact that he had Sentinel, the fact that he had Immortal Spirit, and that he could actually hit these massive amounts of HP, so even if you're doing tons of damage to him, you still have to hit him multiple times to kill him. It actually made Englebert very difficult to kill, especially if there was a healer like Yuna sustaining him. Now, Thancred is going to be in a similar position. However, he doesn't have Immortal Spirit, he doesn't have Sentinel, and he's actually a little bit faster than Englebert is, but it doesn't mean that he's totally ruled out, because he can actually raise his magic resistance to a higher point than Englebert can, and he can still get those really high levels of HP and those really high resistances. If you give him something to give him more spirit, if it's abilities, if it's gear, whatever it is, then Thancred is actually going to be able to take a punch from some of the magic attackers in our current meta. Now we pair this with his super belied barrier, and Thancred is really ready to take some hits. As long as you keep him away from Jaden's LB, then he's going to be able to stand up to a ton of damage, and this barrier is an all damage barrier. It's 3 times, so this will really complete his tankiness bruiser package. Thancred got a pretty cool job level 25 skill, Blasting Zone 2, which is a nice AoE with a significant 30 defense break. This should be a very powerful skill that can enable a lot of different units in your formations. He also has resistance break on Red Mage sub, which is actually physical scaling if you didn't know, and it reduces spirit by a whopping 38. It's also a 2-hit attack, which means it can chain. If you want to chain your Elena or Jaden into that, then they are for sure going to kill whatever they're hitting. So those two options for you are going to make it Thancred able to play with a lot of different units in your box, and particularly in PvE where you can control how and when he uses those, it just makes him a very, very useful unit. Thancred can also buff his party members' defense. So Heart of Stone is a 25 defense buff, and if you plan the AI around this skill, it can make a really big difference. However, it was a lot more impactful when the meta was more skewed towards physical damage in the earlier stages of the game. At this point, it's a lot harder to count on just coming up against only physical damage, but when you can, Heart of Stone can actually make or break a composition. Last pro I want to talk about is Magic Reflex, because this is a really powerful skill that obviously a lot of people hate, and it's important for Thancred to have this during the light meta. It's not something that you depend on, but it's definitely a pro to talk about. We're going to move on to the cons, and we already kind of talked about this first one, but magic attacks are going to pummel Thancred, and he doesn't have Immortal Spirit like Englebert does, so that's kind of a big deal. There's no Sentinel either. However, he does have that barrier as long as he stays away from a barrier break, and you know, there aren't that many magic barrier breaks out there. There are some pretty significant ones like Jaden's LB or the Black Rose Witch also has one as well, but it's still that weakness is something that you have to watch out for, because people like Jaden can use Jamming Thrust and Elena can use, you know, Earthrending Pain or whatever you have her set to. Even though Thancred's agility looks massive compared to Englebert's, it is low at 61. That's definitely a con for him, and the fact that he has 3 move also is going to limit him. However, he can go to 1 jump with a passive, but it's kind of tricky to figure out how you're going to fit that on. So there's a little bit of mobility that you can work with there, but 3 move and 61 agility, it's definitely going to be a problem. His actual skills don't reach that far except for horizontal jump, but you only have, you don't have any sort of range height there on that skill, so he is going to be limited in his ability to get to the enemy and actually deal with them. I've chosen Lucio and Englebert as the comparisons for Thancred because Thancred kind of fills both of their roles in one unit slot, which is super useful. Now, he can't be a full tank like Englebert can purely because of that lack of hate generation. However, he can be a very, very sturdy light boy, and maybe you can put Valve Love on him, especially when we get sub VCs. That's going to be an option for you. But let's talk about Lucio first, because they fill very similar PvE roles. So Lucio has more utility, he's got changing attack types, he's got mobility, he has that 4 move, and he also has better agility, but Thancred can break defense as well. He can also break the spirit, and he has some chaining. So Thancred's going to be an option for you. They're both free, but Thancred is more of an investment if you're not able to farm his shards during this event. As for Englebert comparisons, Englebert is a sturdier tank, he's got more HP, he's got more defense, but they're not that far off. They have very similar resistances, but like I said earlier, that Immortal Spirit, the hate generation, all that stuff that Englebert has, it just means that Thancred can't fill the same role, but Thancred can take similar damage when it comes to using his barrier, and especially when it comes to magic-based damage, because neither of them are meant to take on magic-based damage, but they can be spec'd in order to take less damage in that regard. So when we look at Thancred compared to these units, we really have to just look at him as a bruiser. In Mono Light, he's going to have significant HP, he's going to have huge resistances, and it should allow him to survive some damage from opposing light teams if you can give him some spirit stat. Before we wrap up, I just have a few miscellaneous information to share with you. So first is Thancred's TMR. It's pretty decent. If you don't need an agility TMR, or you have another source of agility in your equipment, like the pod or like the wind spear, then it's going to be really good for anyone that can equip cloth armor, because it has 15 light resist, and that's obviously a great tool to have that can help you deal with Elena and Jaden. You can pair it with something like Tidus's necklace, so you still have a high spirit equipment because it gives defense. It's definitely a nice thing to have, and if you can get him to 99 purely for the TMR, then that's great. You should still do that for free. Don't spend any Visiore on that. And then FYI, Thancred can only use the Lionheart replica weapon that is farmed via his event. You cannot use any other weapon on him. It's really important to note. You have to farm one. They're very easy to farm and to craft because they don't use the regular MR items, so you're gonna have no problem getting one. Especially, even if you're a new player, you're still gonna have no problem getting one. I farmed one from scratch on my JP account with like a brand new account, and it was easy. The other thing to think about is that when you look at these other light bruisers, you look at people like Cecil and Lucio and then Englebert, they can all equip armor, and with Thancred he can only use cloth and hats, so he's not going to use knight's armor, he's not going to use brigandine to help his bulkiness, but he could use some other things like the smart coat that would be pretty sweet for him. Alright, so you're probably wondering at this point, should you even build Thancred? And I think if he was a regular unit that you had to pull for him, you had to build him and spend your Visiore, I would say no, don't pull for him, don't do it. But he's free and you can get his shards for free. So you can go for him. And I think that a lot of people should go for him. There's so much coming out in the next few weeks that no, don't spend your Visiore on him. However, you can farm all these tombstones of Goetia during this event, and every single day you can buy some summon tickets for the Final Fantasy XIV event, and those summon tickets have a chance of dropping 5, 10, 40 Thancred shards. So if you're really lucky, you can build them all the way for free. You have to make sure that you are farming enough currency so that every single day you're buying your 10 tickets and you can get as many Thancred shards as you can. If you don't get enough Thancred shards from this summon process, maybe you're building them for the first time or you're just really unlucky, then I recommend you put them in the barracks and you still don't spend any Visiore, because you're going to need every single last bit of it for all the stuff that's coming up for the Final Fantasy VI, for the global exclusive that we'll be getting at some point, and then also for the Persona collaboration that's hopefully coming right after that. So don't spend your Visiore on him. Even if you want to use them right away, just slow build them, and I promise that once he's done, he's going to be really fun to use, not just in PvE, but I mean mostly in PvE, but also in some fun PvP situations, especially things like Arena where you can be very selective with your opponent. Alright, that's going to be it for me. Thanks so much for watching the video, and you can show your support for the channel by liking, commenting, subscribing. It all helps me. It helps with the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate that help and that support. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all in the next video.